Hi everyone, welcome to a new series of ukulele videos with me, Matt Stead. In this series, Uke TLC, Uke Tender Loving Care, I'm going to show you how to take care of your ukuleles and how to get the best out of them. We're going to look at all sorts of subjects from string types, words, looking after your ukulele with things like humidity and all sorts of many other things. In the next few videos, we're going to look at one of the most important things in terms of being a ukulele owner, and that's the setup of your ukulele. Well, what's a ukulele setup? Basically, think of your ukulele as a living, breathing musical tool. And everyone has certain requirements when it comes to ukulele. For instance, some people like the strings slightly higher off the fretboard so they can really dig in when they're doing fingerstyle. Some people like them a little bit lower. Some people are more fussy than others on how sharp the fret ends are, so that there are all these individual little things that you can dial in to make your ukulele play beautifully for you. And often when the ukulele comes from the factory, if it's a luthier made instrument or an instrument which is worth, a few quid, you'll probably find that the setup has already been done for you. But mass-produced factory ukes, which can be brilliant ukes of course, they often come straight from the factory with just a kind of generic setup. It hasn't really been looked at in a lot of detail. So sometimes you'll find things like sharp fret ends here, and you might find the string height is too much. So in these first few videos, I'm going to show you how to deal with that yourself rather than going to a shop or paying someone to have them do it for you. Let's take a look. In today's video, we're going to concentrate on the frets, the actual metal frets on your ukulele. And that's really important because that affects the comfort of your playing and of course the intonation and the tuning of your ukulele, so it's incredibly important. I'm going to teach you how to level the frets. Now you might not need to do that, I'll explain why in a bit more detail soon. I'm going to show you how to crown and polish the frets so they're really comfortable. Then I'm going to show you how to nourish the fretboard, which is really important as well. The reason I'm starting with this video where we're going to work on the frets first is because when we work on the frets we might actually lower them ever so slightly or alter them. It will affect the string action on your ukulele. So things like raising or lowering the saddle and the nut, I always do that after I've worked on the frets first. So let's have a look. Now if you are going to do some setup work on your ukulele, I recommend you being in a well ventilated room with plenty of light so you can really see what you're doing. The other thing that's really important is because we want to take care of our beloved ukuleles, make sure you've got some either matting or a towel down just to rest your ukulele upon so it's not going to scratch upon the wood of your worktop or table. You can do this at home, you don't need a workshop at all, you can even do a lot of this on your lap. But I prefer to work at a table with some matting down just to keep the ukulele from getting scratched. Notice that I also have a neck rest here. That's really important because when we work on the neck we're going to be putting a slight, not a massive amount, but a slight amount of pressure on the neck. So just having something underneath it will just support it. If you don't have an expensive neck rest, most people won't, you could just roll up a towel and it will serve the same function. Now you notice that my ukulele has no strings on at the moment. I've taken them off to do this work. If you would like to keep your strings on whilst you do this, or the next bit whilst we work with wire wool, you can just detune them slightly, even without detuning them even. If you're really careful, you can just remove the strings, taking your finger underneath each string and pull it to one side of the nut, like so. Now you've got a couple of options here. As you work on the neck, you can actually hold those strings in place just using two fingers as you work away, holding them out of the way. That will be absolutely fine. If you're worried about accidentally filing or sanding the edge of the strings, you can put a bit of tape on them. Another thing that a lot of luthiers and the like will do is to get a bit of blue painter's tape, masking tape, and just literally use that to hold the strings to one side. All it takes is one piece of masking tape, strings are out of the way, you can do the work on the ukulele, masking tape off, strings back in place, tune them up and you're ready to go. The first thing I'm going to do on this ukulele is level the frets. That means that every fret is going to sit at the same height, which is going to be really, really important for intonation, but also for stopping buzzing. Now, most ukuleles you won't need to do this on. There's several ways you can check. First of all, if you play your ukulele when it arrives, if there's no buzzing, the string height is relatively comfortable, you really shouldn't need to level the frets. There is another way to check it, which is a little bit more detailed. Let's just take a quick look at that. My favourite way to check for uneven frets is to take a steel gauge or ruler. Either of these would be absolutely fine. You can use a plastic one, even a credit card will do. And what I do is I place it at various points on the fretboard and I rock left to right by putting pressure on with my fingers. Now, if the frets are completely level, when I move it this way, like this, it shouldn't rock. And here, not much rocking, I can't really do much. Down here, not much. I can do it all over the fretboard. Earlier, just to test this one, I did it up here. And if you notice, here it is. Can you hear that? As I rock it side to side, I can hear a noise. So that means that there must be an even fret roundabouts here. Now I can dial that in by really working out which one it is. But when we're levelling the frets, it's going to make them all even all the way through anyway. But there we go, little rocking motion. There's my uneven fret. Now, as I say, most of you won't need to do this next part in terms of fret levelling, and it does involve a bit of equipment. Here I have a fret file, just a short block fret file. You can get these longer. So if you don't feel that this is the kind of thing you're going to do, just fast forward the video at this point, because later on when we look at polishing the frets, you'll want to do that to maintain every uke, so that's going to be super important. But let's have a go at filing the frets with this block, just so you can see how it's done out of interest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my fret file and I'm going to pass it over the frets without putting too much force down, just a gentle downward force. And I'm going to do it evenly all over the ukulele fretboard, making sure I'm going up this way and down this way to cover all of the frets. Long motion. Now, as you do this, you'll hear that at certain points, you'll hear more rattling and more noise. That's where you need to concentrate, where that fret was higher. And in this case, this was up in this part of the fretboard. I'm not sure how well this will pick up in the video, but if you look at the frets every now and then as you're filing, you'll see areas where they'll become more shiny, and you'll see where the fret has actually flattened down a little bit where it's level, and that's a good indication that the filing is work, and that's where you need to place most of your pressure and attention. Now, as I say, that last part I will only do on certain ukuleles that need it, but this next part I will do on nearly all ukuleles, and you can do this on your own ukuleles to get a really beautifully smooth fretwork to make your ukulele play like butter and be really comfortable. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rub finer and finer sandpaper over the frets. I like to use this kind of wet waterproof abrasive paper. You can get this from all sorts of places online. And I start with 600 grit. Now, if your ukulele has just very fine tooling marks on the frets or almost none at all, you might want to start up at 800. But I start with 600, then 800, then 1000, and finally 1500. Now, what you can do at this point, if you want to be super careful, is tape off the fretboard. So place some painter's tape very lightly next to the fret. When it goes to the other side, you'll just take a Stanley knife or a very sharp scalpel and very carefully just cut so just the fret is showing, and you can do that all over the fretboard. Some people also like to take some painter's tape and just place it along the side of the fretboard. I'm not doing a very good job, but just to illustrate very quickly. just so that when you're sanding you don't accidentally take the finish off the side. Now, because I've been doing this quite some time, I don't feel the need to tape up the fretboard. I can control my fingers enough that I'm not going to rub over the side, and it's absolutely fine. So just to be aware, if you don't trust yourself, just place some tape all the way along the fretboard, and you can even place it along the top of the ukulele, up here, just being careful where you place it. Just so that when you're doing your working, if you do accidentally go too far, you're not going to damage the top. Again, I'm not going to do that just because I'm used to the angle to press so that I won't damage the top anyway. But something you can consider if you're doing this on your own ukulele. Next up, you're going to take a piece of your sandpaper. You're going to tear it just a small strip off and wind it relatively tightly around one of your fingers. I like to use the index finger of my strongest hand, my right hand, just to create a little roll all the way around, and you can hold it in place using one of your other fingers if you would like to. Then what we're going to do is we're going to pass this sandpaper over all of the frets, and first of all I'm just going to do it on the top of the frets rather than at the sides of the fretboard. That will be something like this. Now you should notice as you're doing this that the tooling marks, those little marks that the file creates on the fretboard, should be starting to disappear. You want to do this for a good 5 to 10 minutes, straight all over the frets. Once you've done that, what I tend to do is just angle the ukulele. I'm going to physically lift it just so you can see for camera, but you can do this just by moving your arm. And I'm going to pass the paper now so that it gets the side of the frets. Now this is really important because what it does is it gets rid of any sharp frets here and it smooths them out so you get this nice rounded fret end. You might notice in a speeding video that I'm occasionally turning the paper or rewinding it round my finger, and that's just to make sure I'm not just using the same worn bit of paper. If you feel it's worn away too much, just grab another strip. Now to access these frets up here and to make sure it's even both sides, I'm going to be very careful of course as I go up here not to damage the finish of the uke. Remember you can tape up both sides if you like, just being careful. But to make sure I get both sides, what I'll do is I'll reverse my ukulele, I'll move my neck support, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing on this side here to make sure I comfortably get to all of the edges. So that's the 600 done. Now I'm going to go onto the 800 grit paper and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'll put this in fast forward. And finally, exactly the same thing with 1000 grit. Of course, make sure you're checking these frets as you go. See how your work's getting on and see how much more work is required. Just for good measure, for this one, I'm going to use some 1500 grit sandpaper just to make sure those frets are looking extra silky smooth. Now by this point you should have found that two things will have happened. One great, one not so good. The great one is your frets should now be nice and smooth. And by using that finger action, rolling the sandpaper around our finger, what we're doing is we're recrowning the frets. Where we flatten them with the file so they look like this, now they'll have that nice radius on them. They'll be nice and curved and recrowned. Should be really comfortable to play. Now the other not quite so great thing which will happen at this point is you'll probably have residue all over your fingers if you've not been using gloves. I'm too lazy to use gloves. So at this point try and rub any of that residue off just using a microfiber cloth off the ukulele itself and go and wash your hands. I use an older microfiber cloth at this point to just get rid of the excess residue that we've caused. Now don't worry at this moment if your fingerboard is looking rather grey and unsightly. As long as the frets are looking nice, that's all that matters at this point. Later when we apply some lemon oil to the fretboard to smooth it out, that will help remove the residue as well and get it looking nice and beautiful, as will the wire wool that we're going to use for the next step. What I'm about to show you applies to whether you've just filed, sanded and recrowned your frets, or whether your ukulele has just got grubby after a few months of playing. You might notice if your uke has been sat around in the factory or a shop for a while, or if you've been playing it for a while, that the frets will start to get tarnished, and you want to just kind of shine them up a bit, make them a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more sightly. Well, it's really quite simple. What we do is we take some quadruple zero wire wool, that's 0, 0, 0, 0 wire wool, and we're going to pass that over the frets. What that does is it takes out still a few tooling marks if there are any left, or sanding marks. It takes off the grubbiness and that kind of tarnished look from your frets, which is going to be really sweet. So let's have a look at how to do that. You can tape up these frets if you want to with a bit of painter's tape and then score along so that we have the frets showing. But honestly, I think this is fine to do without tape. This stuff isn't too abrasive. Just try not to rub it too strongly along the body. And if you've done the rest of the work on your uke, if you've been working on it without tape, this will take off the griminess that we got from the sandpaper as well. So we're going to take the wire wool. I just take a little kind of pinch of wool, about that much, in my hand, ball it up a little bit so it's not kind of all over the place, and then just rub it gently across the uke. Noticing that I've got the neck rest in place, so I'm not putting undue pressure on the neck where it won't take it. Just rubbing it side to side, and immediately, if I was to lift this up close, you'll see the shine coming on those frets as compared to the rest of the fretboard, and also the fretboard itself is getting cleaner. And what we do is we do that all the way up and down the fretboard. I start to go up and down over the frets first, and then from left to right. To get rid of the filings, you can either use a vacuum, as some people do, on your Hoover attachment, or compressed air, or I like to, a good blow, as simple as that. Any other kind of loose filings on a fretboard, you can either use a spare microfiber cloth if you've got one handy, just to take off the excess, or you can use some tissue. But the next thing that we do with lemon oil is going to remove any kind of residual bits and pieces again. But already my frets are a lot shinier, really comfortable. They feel super smooth along the fretboard now, ready to play. Now, as long as you're not pushing too hard with the wire wool, you're not going to take off the actual metal of the frets itself. You're just going to take off the tarnishing and a few of the tooling marks if there are any on there. But at the same time, you are going to remove a micro amount of the fret nickel or fret wire. So what I would recommend is I wouldn't do this more than every 6 months. I tend to change my strings about every 6 months on my ukulele. And when I do, I give it a very light going over with the quadruple zero wire wool, and that's enough. Next up, we're going to condition the fretboard. The fretboard is made of wood on most ukuleles, so it was therefore once a living, breathing object. And wood can dry out and it can crack. Now, some of taking care of the fretboard is down to humidity, and I'm going to talk about humidifying your uke in another video. But it's also really nice to just nourish your fretboard with a slight oil. Now, I can't say this enough. We use a very minimal amount of oil. I'll talk you through it in just a moment, because too much can be put too much moisture into the fretboard, and it can also mean that it's really hard to kind of wipe off and it gets all kind of greasy. So just a little bit is really important. And your fretboard, if you have been doing all the steps so far, might be looking a little bit grey at the moment. You might need to get rid of some of the detritus and really shine it up. And that's another place where lemon oil comes in place. Now, I like to use lemon oil. I've got this one by Music Nomad called F1. One of the most popular ones that a lot of people use is Dunlop 65. Here comes in a little bottle with an applicator, which is really useful. You can also use mineral oil. I've known people to use linseed oil and gunstock oil as well. The important thing is just to go very, very lightly. Some of these oils, such as the Dunlop 65, will come with a little applicator that you can just gently rub over the fretboard to apply the lemon oil. Again, just a little bit is enough. This one comes with a little kind of linear applicator on the top. You just open it up and we drip it in. Now, really, you only need a little tiny drip. If you're putting it on a microfiber cloth, which is another way of doing it, literally just a few drips will be enough. See how small that is on a microfiber cloth. Now, as I move that together and put it on the ukulele, of course, there's a little bit from the applicator from the Jim Dunlop that I put on, but look at that, that's enough. The ukulele is already shining up and looking nice and conditioned. There we go, rub it in. I tend to go up and down over the frets this way and then side to side as well, just making sure that I'm getting in any tiny gaps in and around the frets and nourishing right to the top. And already that fretboard, oh, you can see the shine on it. It's looking really nice. It's got rid of any detritus as well from the wire wool, which is fantastic. If I've been working on the ukulele, I tend to add two applications. So the first application is really I'm using it to clean. I know that's not its purpose, but it does a fantastic job. So just a little tiny drop just to clean any of those wire wool filings off. Then I'll do it again, just a couple of drops, not too much, and I'll applicate this, I'll apply it even to the whole of the fretboard. Yet again, just letting it get into every crevice. Try not to get this onto the body of the uke if you can avoid it, and never use lemon oil on the body. It can harm the finishes on your ukulele. So in terms of cleaning the body of the uke, just use your breath and a microfiber cloth. That will be more than enough. Now, it's quite important in terms of your oil that you allow it to soak in. If you wipe it off straight away, you're kind of going to reduce the benefits of it being on the fretboard. So what I like to do now is just leave my ukulele alone, leave it resting on the side for at least a good sort of quarter of an hour, 20 minutes to really allow that oil to soak in. When I've done that, I take another part of the cloth, obviously part of the cloth that doesn't have the lemon oil on, and I just wipe off any extra residue, just being careful to get any that might have crept in the bottom of the frets, cleaning it up nicely like so. And there we have it, all that tarnishing is gone, any tool marks that were there have been removed, and we have lovely, beautiful frets. And you'll also notice that the fretboard is nicely conditioned and ready to play. Now, if you had any tape on the ukulele at this point, you can remove it really carefully. Now, just be very gentle with that, because even though painter's tape is gentle, if you pull too quickly, you can harm the finish. So very gently and very slowly pull away from you as you take this tape off, just very gently, a bit at a time. Now, you'll have to take my word for this, because there's no such thing as touch-o-vision. But now that we've done all that work on the frets, I can tell you that when I rub my hand up and down the side of the neck, it feels so comfortable. I can't feel any sharpness there at all. And you've probably heard the phrase, people saying this before in shops or on videos, playing like butter. And what they mean is, as your hand passes over those frets as you play up and down the neck, it feels so comfortable, nothing catches, it feels great. And that is the beauty of a good setup. Now, what we're going to do in the next video is look at adjusting the height of the saddle, which is the small piece of bone or plastic that goes in the bridge here, and the nut. And we're going to look at the ideal string height, otherwise known as action, and importantly, how to adjust that. As I say, always start with the frets first because that will affect things later on, and then we'll have a look at saddle and nut adjustments, and you'll see how beneficial a good setup on a ukulele can be. Well, I hope you found that useful. I'm off to tidy up this messy workshop now. I will see you in the next video of Uke TLC. Take care everyone, and Uke on.